Welcome back to Off the Record, and I am back on the sofa for two reasons. One, I am feeling somewhat disillusioned with the state of things in the UK at the moment, so I need somewhere comfortable to sit. But two, I also need somewhere comfortable to sit because I am in quite a lot of pain right now. I had a serious back injury many years ago. That's now translated into sacroiliac inflammation, and it's excruciatingly painful. And I'm not taking any painkillers, so I am in a lot of pain, so forgive me. But I'm also going to do a screen record, and so you can hopefully see the bits that I look at if they are relevant, and I'll put them on screen for you. But this is going to be somewhat opinionated and a bit of a ramble, and I've moved it off my main channel. I heard the people that didn't want it on there. You get me. We are here Off the Record. Please do subscribe. I am blessed and I'm humbled with the viewer base that I have. Thank you all so much for subscribing so I can share this with you, because I think we do need to talk about this. Now, this video is not to be stirring up frustrations and hatred and so on, but it is to express genuine concern for the UK and its citizens. Because not only do I read that Keir Starmer's been kept out of certain key discussions internationally because it won't have escaped you that President Trump gave the order to bomb Iran and to eradicate its nuclear facilities, they hope at least. But also, on top of a story that we had the Palestine Action Group claiming responsibility for breaking into an airbase and causing millions of pounds worth of damage to aircraft, and we are left to wonder how on earth that could happen. How could a group like this break into an airbase undetected and escape undetected, causing millions of pounds worth of damage to aircraft? On top of that, it's then no surprise that we ostensibly have no control of our borders, despite Angela Rayner screaming at her opponent Chris Philp to say that they are getting control of our borders. Well, evidently not, because in June alone, the official statistics show, which means it could be more, it could be less, but it could well be more, 4,500 illegal migrants crossing the Channel in June alone. And that's over 2,000 if you look at the last 6 days alone, because if you look at these statistics here, there are dozens of boats coming across and thousands of individuals about whom we know absolutely nothing about their criminal background and absolutely nothing about their intentions here. Safe to say that 95% claim asylum, and if I were being uncharitable, I would say that 95% are doing that because they know that they go through the whole process and they are not removed. And the 5%, well, maybe the 5% do something else or don't correctly fill in the forms or whatever. I don't know. But we have Mike Tapp tweeting, and to be fair to Mike Tapp, tweeting that they will go after those who are smuggling people into this country and do something about it. But my response to him here, which hopefully is on screen by now, I say, well, start with the men that are driving these boats, because they are literally rocking up on shore. And if they can't identify who is driving the boat, well, I would suggest that they take them all back to France, because they were safe in France, they would be safe in France, and yes, it might upset France for a while, but tough. They would stop overnight, I suspect. Now, my usual caveat, because I do know that some people are well deserving of the assistance of the UK, and that is right. That is a valid argument. So I'll never detract from that argument. I know people that have done that. But the thousands that are crossing the Channel, about whom we know next to nothing, is posing a national security emergency. Robert Jenrick has said quite openly that this is a national security emergency. Rupert Lowe has said quite openly, quite repeatedly, that they must all be deported and ideally returned back to France, which is where they came from. But what really concerns me is that when one such asylum seeker, just one out of the thousands that have come across, housed in a migrant hotel, was charged with rape, but then this whole story was covered up to avoid inflaming community tensions. Now, we have a system of open and public justice in the UK, meaning nothing is secretive unless it's a matter of national security and it is deemed to be secret by the courts and so on, and that is the way that they do it. But otherwise, it is a public justice system. And we also have a free press. We have the freedom of expression, which is why the newspapers can report on it, which is why I can tell you what my concerns about it are quite freely, quite openly, so long as I'm not directly inciting anybody to violence and stuff, which of course I would not. I condemn completely anybody taking matters into their own hands any more than the law allows, which I will explain in a moment. But any more than the law allows, I absolutely condemn. People should not be taking to the streets, should not be committing violent acts, should not be taking up vigilantism and so on. But the law does allow a certain amount for protecting somebody else. For example, if you were walking down the street and you saw somebody being attacked, you can act in defense of that person. That comes under the defense of self-defense. You are defending somebody with necessary and then proportionate force. I've dealt with that a lot on my main channel. But in this case here, this rape charge against this asylum seeker housed in a migrant hotel was covered up to avoid inflaming community tension. And he appeared in Portsmouth Magistrates Court earlier this month, since been remanded into custody. Local councillors were warned not to speak about the suspect's housing, according to the Sun's report. The council officer raised fears of community tension, with another privately urging the prominent councillor not to share privileged confidential information, after he took to social media to express his frustration. Portsmouth Independence Party councillor leader George Madrick said that this is precisely why the public don't trust politicians and public bodies. Things are hidden that should be disclosed. Anyone involved in any form of cover-up, he says, from disclosure to the public should question their role in a publicly funded position. Portsmouth City Council also appeared to admit that it chose not to make any public comments due to the concerns about local residents responding with fury. And who could blame them? Because, again, if people are coming across the channel illegally, then being housed in hotels locally, and then are committing these heinous, horrific criminal acts against their residents, obviously they are going to be upset about it. But they are entitled to know about it. And these are, I've aired my frustrations before, that these very rarely get sentences that I think most of the public would think are appropriate. But regardless, the public are entitled to know about it, entitled to comment on it, and so on. A spokesperson said, "We knew the Home Office accommodation link would become public knowledge through the court proceedings, and based on events elsewhere in the country, we were conscious that there might be community tensions related to it." However, of course, Nigel Farage and Robert Jenrick were both furious about this, with Robert Jenrick saying that the perception of a migrant cover-up was growing and that illegal small boat crossings are a national security emergency. "We've seen terrorism, murders and rapes from those who have come here illegally. It's outrageous. Women in towns with asylum seeker hotels shouldn't have to live in fear. The authorities must trust the public with the truth and act to protect them." Meanwhile, Nigel Farage demanded that those involved hiding the truth face the sack. And I have to agree, because anyone in public office cannot be covering up information from the public. The public deserve to know. They deserve the truth. It is a public justice system. And I have to agree with Robert Jenrick here. This is absolutely 100% unequivocally, without any shred of doubt, a national security emergency. We've seen a number of Iranian men charged with terrorism offences in recent months, some of whom reportedly have arrived in the UK by small boat or some other unlawful method. And statistically, out of the 40-something thousand that have crossed the channel so far under Labour's watch, this is quite categorically a national security emergency. It cannot be ignored. You cannot escape the truth. This is a national security emergency. But then begs the question, what are they doing about it? Because they are clearly letting it happen to a degree. Now, I'm not saying they are waving them in, but failing to prevent it from happening is akin to letting it happen. Because no one can tell me that with our military and the Navy and the Air Force, etc., that we cannot prevent this from happening. If this were a hostile force, I use the word if very carefully, if this were a hostile force of 40,000 men, and we didn't prevent that from happening, then that is not keeping our nation secure, is it? So just to repeat for emphasis, if that were a hostile force of some 40,000 men, and we didn't prevent that from happening, then that is a hostile takeover. Then this really is only one small step away from that, in that we simply don't know the intentions of the thousands of men that are crossing the channel. We know the intentions of a few of them that have been arrested on terrorism charges, and the few of them that have been arrested for any other kind of offences. This one example arrested on rape charges and remanded into custody. We know those, we just don't know the rest. And so statistically, this is a serious problem, but they are not preventing it from happening. That is my true concern. And this is not just about illegal migration either. This is about the general state of things, particularly in London, but elsewhere as well. You've seen all the videos, and the problem here is the more videos you see and that go viral of people shoplifting, getting away with it, just stuffing stuff into bags and walking out, and security stand there doing nothing. And that might be at the instruction of Tesco. It might be because the security officer just doesn't want to get involved, and like I say, has been told not to get involved, or is fearful for getting involved, or whatever, or perhaps fearful that if he gets involved and physically restrains the person, that then they get charged with some kind of assault, which is possible, because you can detain someone for shoplifting, but you still can only use proportionate force. And if you were charged with assault yourself, then you would have to demonstrate that firstly, the force was necessary, and secondly, that the force you used was proportionate. Because you can use force to detain someone for shoplifting because it remains an indictable offence. There's a lot of discussion on that on my main channel. I won't bore you with the law here, but whilst it is ordinarily tried summarily if it's low value shoplifting under £200, but it remains indictable, so you can still elect Crown Court trial. Thus, you can still carry out a citizen's arrest. It's not really called citizen's arrest, it's just under section 24A of PACE. Any person other than a constable can arrest somebody for an offence which is indictable, which includes shoplifting. So you can detain somebody for that. But they choose not to. So anyway, back to my point. I told you I'd ramble, but back to my point. So the concern here is the more videos people see of that, the more they get away with it. And so then that just breeds copycat crime. And so London, through the eyes of social media, to give you a glimpse of what's really going on when you don't see it firsthand for yourself, it is absolutely disgraceful. Statistics tell you there's 80,000 phone thefts, there's countless shopliftings, and the situation is continuing to deteriorate. We need to do something about this. As a country, we need to fund the police properly. We need the police to be able to take action without fear of reprisals. We need people to be able to take action legally, I must add, without fear of reprisals. So in that situation, if you see someone who is shoplifting, you should be able to step in without fear of being prosecuted yourself. You should be able to alert things on social media without fear of being prosecuted for what you say on social media. And people should be able to air their frustrations without fear of being prosecuted for what they say on social media. Now, I am not saying that it is okay to incite or encourage violence. It is clearly not, and you should not do that. What I do think it should be okay to do is to step in and defend somebody or defend a shop to keep law and order. Now, the courts are slow to encourage vigilantism because they say you should wait for the police, but the police are overstretched and underfunded. And the police themselves are worried about getting involved because they fear being prosecuted for what they do. And I think this is a problem. And so all of these things combined together with the increase in numbers of people who are coming into the country. Now, whilst those who are claiming asylum are housed and fed and given the minimum amount to survive, I understand that they cannot claim benefits in the normal way. They cannot work unless I think their application has been outstanding for a certain amount of time. Whilst they might be allowed to volunteer, but other than that, they are surviving and living on next to nothing. And so they are likely to get frustrated. They are likely to get bored. And so there is nothing to say that just like anyone else in the UK, they won't get frustrated and bored and end up turning to things like crime to get something else that they don't have, get food that they don't have, or get something else that they don't have, or, as in this other case, go out and commit horrific crimes like this one that's been charged here. There is nothing to say that that's not going to happen with many, many more people. Now, the difficulty that we have here is that the government and its policies have obviously decided to house asylum seekers as opposed to have thousands of them living on the streets, because obviously that's going to be worse. So they decided to house them, and initially in hotels and wherever. They've said that they're going to reduce the number of hotels, but that means they're going to dispersal housing, which is housing that you and I would otherwise pay for, or buying buildings and so on. And they are living in other local areas, which may itself raise tensions in the area anyway, which is why it appears that this one local authority has decided not to publish the fact that they were living in hotels nearby or whatever. All of these things are just going to get worse and worse statistically with those numbers. However good the intentions of many of them might be, statistically, those that are likely to break the law are going to break the law. And the higher those numbers go, the higher statistics of people that are going to break the law. And this is, without doubt, a national security emergency. And quite frankly, they need to do something about it, because I know a lot of people now that are worried to be walking around in public, around the streets, certainly alone. And if the one horrific story that I read just recently is anything to go by, when one teenage girl was assaulted by two men who were delivery drivers, and they delivered something to her home. Her mum was at work. They went in and assaulted her. But the insult of all this is they each sexually assaulted her. But the insult of all this is they received a lower sentence than Lucy Connolly for one tweet that she posted online. Now, albeit that was inciting violence and she pleaded guilty to it, and the sentencing guidelines are very harsh for posting things like that. So I don't agree with what she posted. I think it was wrong. But I don't agree that her sentence should have been as long. And I don't agree that these two guys should have received a lesser sentence than Lucy Connolly. I can understand why people don't think that these sentences reflect the crime. And when compared with each other, they just don't make sense. And when taking the whole situation into account, underfunded police, not securing our borders, it is no wonder people are getting frustrated. So that's why we are here off the record. I told you it would be opinionated. So I'm going to say these things for you to air these frustrations without inciting any violence, without inciting any hatred, so that you can feel that some of us understand. So hopefully you won't post things that incite violence and hatred and get yourselves into trouble, because I absolutely don't want you to do that. Instead of that, please subscribe to my channel here, Off the Record. We can share these discussions with each other openly and freely, but without crossing any lines and without breaking any laws. And hopefully I can discourage you from breaking any of those laws and getting yourself into trouble. So with that, thank you for watching. Please do subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.